with the rumours about Cody Rhodes coming back for WrestleMania, there was one other big rumour about someone who was going to be performing on the card, and that was 76-year-old Vince McMahon. And the match would have been, I believe, against Pat McAfee.
Right, okay.
That was the internal belief. What changed over a couple of weeks, really, and they decided that he would take on Austin Theory in McMahon's place. Austin Theory is one of the people that Vince McMahon, I think the last person, really, that Vince McMahon has basically said he is going to be a future star. Vince McMahon has never been wrong about the people he said are going to be future stars. It looked like he was wrong once, and that was with Drew McIntyre. And Drew McIntyre didn't become a star. He went away, hit the independents, worked really hard, came back, and he was a star. Drew McIntyre headlined WrestleMania. Yeah. So Vince McMahon's never been wrong. Austin Theory is a sort of cross between Randy Orton and The Miz. He looks a bit like a literal physical cross between them, and I find him both irritating and a bit boring. But that was a disappointment for me, because I was like, again, I would happily watch Vince McMahon do a match. So I've never seen with my own eyes.
So I saw this kind of interview.
So the Pat McAfee Show, they had Vince McMahon come on and do an interview.
But then at no point did they ever talk about this possible situation?
No. Right at the end of the interview, Vince McMahon does a thing where he says to Pat McAfee, I want you to wrestle at WrestleMania. That's an offer I'm making to you.
Right.
And Pat McAfee, I mean, there were bits where, again, it was hard to tell whether or not it was set up or whether or not that's the sort of thing Vince McMahon would have done, knowing full well that Pat McAfee would like to do it. Pat McAfee, former NFL player, very, very popular guy. He did commentary, and he ended up having one match in NXT against Adam Cole. And it's widely reviewed. It was on a takeover. It's widely reviewed as being the best debut match in history. He was really high level. He was a really good performer. And people were like, gosh, he's got a future in this if he wants to do it. Yeah. So they know he can do it, and they know he loves doing it. It would be difficult for anyone, I think, who is in that industry, when you're offered that WrestleMania shot, that you're going to say, no, I don't want to do it. I couldn't tell in the interview whether or not McAfee knew about it in advance. It seemed a little bit, because it was just a bit awkward in places, it seemed like it may have been sprung on him. Maybe it was something he said. There'd been rumours about it for the 2 weeks online about whether he was going to have a WrestleMania match. So I think it was in the air. But he did sort of go, yeah, I'm totally up for that. And there was a bit where he went, obviously we'll have to, sort out the contract at some point.
Is he trying to get a cheap freebie?
Yeah, he's making sure that, Vince McMahon understands that by saying this, Vince isn't like, well, there was no free discuss. You can see him do that.
People will go banana lands when that left with the rolling on it comes from the pocket. Pow, right in the kisser. What? Hey, that's awesome, man. I'm pretty excited.
I think it'll work. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I think it'll work.
Let's go.
You very cool.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool.
Gotta give it up. Gotta give it up.
Yeah!
Gotta give it up for Boba Fett.
I do remember Boba Fett.
Big interview this, because Vince McMahon doesn't really do interviews anymore.
No. Even like historically, he only ever seemed to get interviewed when he was either introducing wrestling to a new audience, or he was batting away steroid claims.
Yes, yeah.
So he doesn't do a lot of this
stuff. And I think in recent years, he's done a lot of the investor conference calls. Right. So there is a thing you can ring in, basically, and they have a conference every quarter. And that's because they have to answer to their shareholders. Yeah. So he will give a sort of précis of what's going on and stuff. But Pat McAfee is a great commentator on wrestling. I think he might be one of the best colour guys in the business. I mean, he was, for me, a very stereotypical American sports podcast stroke YouTube show host.
Yes.
Where he continually is screaming. He occasionally will stand up and start screaming and then not sit down again. And they had a really, really weird setup.
Yeah.
And you actually forwarded this to me before I'd watched the interview, where McAfee has got a desk that's quite a lot higher than this pit that the guests sit in. So it's a real flex.
It's like a 1970s kind of reading pit you'd have in a house, like a futuristic LA house.
Well, if you were Conan and you met a big warlord and you had to go into his castle and he'd go, what do you want, wanderer? And make it quick before I execute you. It had that vibe. But what you've got, which is really odd, is Vince McMahon is a pensioner. He is 75.
Yeah.
But he's worked in television for decades and decades, and he must look at this modern setup with the little cameras and the bad set and a screaming man sort of like, standing up and asking questions that are quite rambling. And he must just go, this is pitiful. Look at the modern world is shit. and this is all scum. And he has a massive reticence. I was about to say slight reticence. He has a massive reticence. And it's slightly because he wants to make it clear, I think, to the business world that he isn't the character Mr. McMahon. So whenever he does interviews now, he's just always boringly business.
Yeah.
And he's got a look on his face all the time. Even though Pat McAfee was just saying positive things, there was a look on Vince McMahon's face that he could have just got up and left at any time.
Yeah.
But I'm not listening to this nonsense. You could also see the part of him, which is he has spent his life around sports people, athletes, pro athletes, and hard drinking wrestlers. And he loves the lads.
Yeah.
He is there for the bants, man. And he likes all of that, guys shooting the shit. And you can see he sort of like, he relaxed into it as it went on. Pat McAfee, the way he sort of like brought up questions made it seem like he was just a bit annoying. He was a bit of a kid and stuff. But the actual topics of the questions were pretty good. So he did ask Vince McMahon about the fact that he hates being referenced in Hall of Fame speeches and things like that. And Vince just kept on saying, I don't like anyone, celebrate me. I don't like accolades. He's like, if I don't listen to the bad, I don't listen to the good. I don't want any of them. So he's very much like, leave me alone. Keep me out of
Gets more bad than good though, doesn't he?
Doesn't he? Pat McAfee brought up the fact that he didn't like the word wrestling and why he didn't like it and everything. And Vince had said about that, he said, I think wrestling is limited. He said, would you rather be a wrestler or a superstar?
Yeah.
He said, and that's what we're about. Not, anyone can be a wrestler. You can be a bad wrestler. He said, but, superstars.
I wanted to separate us from everybody else. And my dad was part of the NWA, but he had his own branding. It was Worldwide Wrestling Federation many, many years ago. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought, wow, okay, you're making yourself different from everyone else. And at the time when I bought my dad's business, he had never sold it to me if he knew what I was going to do.
So it's sort of interesting, hearing him say these things, which have been, slightly sort of like guessed at over the years. McAfee also brought up the competition of Impact and AEW, and Vince McMahon couldn't hide the fact that he didn't like even hearing about the other competition. You could see him just sort of shifting and a bit like, fucking hate them.
Vince McMahon, when there's competition, is at his absolute best. So now there was TNA that came and went. Impact is kind of back. Now AEW is the big one. They just bought Ring of Honor, I believe, last night in there. So like when everybody says competition makes Vince McMahon better, what do you think that means?
Well, I'm probably one of the few people in the world who enjoys confrontation. So...
Like you enjoy it.
I enjoy confrontation, physical confrontation. I enjoy that,
Yeah.
And he also said, did he feel anything, Vince McMahon, when he released people? Because a lot of people get released. And Vince, he just sort of said, I'm concerned about what's best for the audience always. He had sort of like this frightening, robotic sort of lack of humanity about him. What was odd about it is you do suddenly see that Vince McMahon has become very old. And there was a bit where his mic, for quite a lot of it, he wasn't quite on mic. Useless modern fucking people. But he just speaks in this really low, raspy voice. And it's the sort of voice that, like, the last words you'd hear, like a family member saying hospice, it's that level. The treasure is buried. Like that. And he's sort of like, I do everything for the audience. It's a sort of slight flex as well. It's a bit, I'll control this.
Yeah.
So
but that is kind of like that shitty managerial style, like 101, like businessman stuff. Like your firm handshake, your eye contact, and then you sort of make people lean in because you're talking so quietly.
Yeah. And he made it really apparent that he wasn't going to give anything away. Yeah. And that was, if you'd have never heard of Vince McMahon, but you listened to the Pat McAfee show, you'd go, who is this guy? Is like one of the 5 most boring men I've ever seen in my life. There was a bit where he sort of like, he sort of says to Pat McAfee, I think about it, I shouldn't even be here, I should have died so many times. And Pat McAfee goes, okay, hang on. What
give me some
of that. And Vince McMahon just bats it away and he goes straight into going, this never feels like work to me.
And the odds of me sitting in here, and even being alive are astronomical. If you knew my background, astronomical.
How come, just one thing, we don't have to dive into all of them, but what do you mean by whenever you say that? You're 76 years old and you're still doing it, you're still working though, like at this point. What do you mean like you shouldn't even be alive, you're talking?
Well, I'm not working though.
Oh, because this is life.
You think this is work, guys? None of this is work. None of what I do is work.
So it's literally that. He goes, when did you nearly die? And he goes, this job has never felt like work. The problem is you can't really go back and go, hang on, stop the fuck there, right? Go back and answer my question. You said, you shouldn't be here. What are you talking about? And obviously what he's talking about is... I'm not even going to say it. It's all the stuff I imagine you'd imagine it would be.
Yeah.
It was just really weird. He's also very, very used to being in control, Vince McMahon. And so he wasn't going to give anything away. He's just used to being feared, I think, by people. And he sort of slightly plays up to that. And I thought it was a weird thing to do, an hour-long interview where you're just like, I'm just going to be difficult and cold. And I thought it was a really, really strange and unsettling interview, really. Some of it that did come out was just brilliant, though. So he mentioned a couple of things. Pat McAfee said, are you excited about the metaverse, in WWE? And Vince McMahon literally almost sort of just going exactly the same as before and just saying, wow, it's not like work, this, it's like a generic thing.
There's so many times when people threaten me. There's a story that Jim Ross was telling me one day, and he was with Bill Watts and some of the other old NWA guys and a whole bunch of them. What are we going to do about this kid? And he's in the men's room in the stall taking care of business, and walks 4 of these most prominent promoters, and they're talking about how they're going to off me. And this guy knows this guy, and I know I can do this. And this guy did this. It was really impressive. And they all know people, so they're all talking about who's going to off me. So now imagine Jim Ross. Bucko! I go kill Vince McMahon!
He mentioned he has excellent Wi-Fi on his jet, which that's a real...
Where's that come from?
I mean, how you just drop that in, just astonishing. He said at one point, he went, back then, my then wife, my wife, he's never been married to anyone but Linda. And he referred to her as my then wife.
My then wife.
We are still married all these years later, which I thought was hilarious. He also talks about the time he severed both his quads at the Royal Rumble.
Yes,
walking
okay.
into the
Good.
ring. And Pat McAfee was like, that was basically hilarious. And Vince McMahon, he sort of went, that takes talent, doing both at the same time. He says, you have absolutely no use of your legs at all. Like that. It was just, there were good bits that were funny. He mentioned that he lifts over 1,000 pounds on a weight bar once a month. And the only time he actually got sort of a bit emotional was when he was talking about his personal trainer, Mike. And he was just like, he was smiling, talking about him, and shaking his head really slowly, like close to sort of going, that guy is my best friend of all. It was just a weird little thing.
I love the guy. We've known each other for so many years. You've been through all kinds of situations, some that didn't make the newspapers and so forth, but look, I get hit by a bus today, and if I do, I want 1 second before I kick to say thank you.
To everybody.
Everybody.
Everything. For everything that has ever been done, like business,
for
personal.
This opportunity to live in this country, to all of it. You just want to be thankful that you are alive and appreciate the fact that you're alive. And I get sometimes more out of taking one big, deep breath than most people do out of breathing a lifetime, because they just don't understand.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very cool.
The thing that was most interesting, Pat McAfee brought up Succession, the TV series.
Right, yeah, nice.
And so he said, so what will happen when you hand over power? A lot of people compared it to Succession with a sort of family dynamic and things.
Yeah.
And Vince McMahon said, I don't think about it a lot, which if you were any of his family, you'd be like, oh, this is not going to be good news. So he said, I don't think about it a lot. He said, you want it to prosper and grow, and whether that's with a family member or without a family member. He said you had to look at it all objectively. He said you treat family member just like you would any other employee. You have to do the right thing for the business. So if that person hasn't worked out, you have to get them out of the company.
Hopefully, if you built something, hopefully you want it to continue on, and prosper and grow, whether that's with a family member or without a family member. And you have to treat it as such. You have to be objective, and look at family members, whoever it is, just like you would other employees. And quite frankly, I probably have expected more, out of my family members, which is probably not the right thing either. but we really
That's going to be a big deal right there, what you just said. You know that, though, absolutely.
But nonetheless.
And that
that's a kind of about as nailed down.
We
isn't it?
all know things have not gone well for Triple H.
Yeah.
We all know that his NXT, that was supposed to take on AEW and that it didn't win. It lost the Wednesday Night War. And very, very quickly, Vince McMahon swooped in, took it away from Triple H, who's managed it for, 5 years, to incredible critical response as well. And he just stripped out everyone who was related to Triple H within that company. Your William Regals, your Road Dogs, everybody who Triple H had put in place, who were basically the team that I think he thought one day he would take with him to run WWE.
Yeah.
All of them have gone.
Yeah.
The only one who's left is Shawn Michaels. As someone commented before, the reason for that is that before Shawn Michaels was one of Triple H's guys, Shawn Michaels was one of Vince McMahon's guys. So there is a sense that when they say that and you say it's like Succession, and you basically say, if a family member doesn't do well, then they're out and we move on. Triple H at the moment has no real role in WWE, which is mad.
Yeah.
Shane McMahon was talent. He came back at the Royal Rumble. He was booking the Royal Rumble. It was widely seen as being a bit of a disaster. He tried to push himself too much. It wasn't appreciated. Vince McMahon fired his own son from the company. He is a ruthless man. And when he says those things, and because he's so guarded, if you end up saying whether it's with a family member or not, the important thing is it thrives. That is pretty much against everything that's been assumed for the last 20 years. It's certainly what it does to me is it says that WWE, they are not looking at keeping it within the family anymore. It's no longer a mom and pop business. They are going to be taking bids as soon as, and it could happen anytime. And that is thrilling, but Jesus Christ, if you're Triple H... I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, everybody loves what I did. Yeah, it didn't get the big hitting numbers and everything. Oh, what, now everything I've spent 30 years doing is in the bin because of you shit. But I mean, Jesus Christ.
Thank you for everything you've done for me. I appreciate
I've
that.
enjoyed this, guys. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the WWE, Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
Yeah!